Imu seems to be a figure shrouded in mystery, but we actually know a lot more about his story than readers realize. And by connecting all the pieces that have either been confirmed or heavily implied about his past, we can put together a very comprehensive timeline of events, as well as a fairly clear picture of his character. Altogether, we can see the tale of an individual who is not some invincible overlord, but in fact a character who has been rightfully terrified of losing power for the last 800 years, because he has been in a race against time ever since he has taken the throne, and as such he has slowly been taking more and more desperate measures to complete his quote-unquote perfect world before it is too late. So let's get into breaking down the complete known history of Imu from the beginning. But before we get into it, make sure to subscribe. And did you know that there was a point where I was ordering dinner out every single day because I hated cooking so much, and I had to order these terrible salads because I didn't want to eat too unhealthy. But Factor has completely fixed that for me. Factor puts your healthy eating on autopilot with meals that are made for you that actually taste good. Factor is a meal delivery service prepared by nutritionists and professional chefs. Now I don't have to waste money on terrible tasting salads, and I still don't have to cook. And right now you can get 50% off your first box of Factor plus free daily greens. It's a once daily greens drink that you'll actually look forward to drinking with real vegetables and nutrients that you might be missing in your daily diet. It doesn't feel like you're having to eat healthy, and you really can pick almost any type of meal you want from Factor, like pasta, steak, or chicken, and it will still taste good and be good for you. So if you want to try it out for yourself, just go to factor75.com right now or click the link in the description below and use code MORGEFDG to get 50% off your first Factor box plus free daily greens. That's code MORGEFDG at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free daily greens. So that aside, here's what we know for sure. During the Second World, Imu was known as Saint Imu Narona, and he was one of the 20 kings of 20 kingdoms that allied together to defeat the Ancient Kingdom. The Ancient Kingdom was considered the preeminent world power at that point in time, which is precisely why it took such a large alliance to come together to challenge it. We know that Imu is now the king of the world, but he aggressively denies the claims that Davy Jones was the previous quote-unquote king of the world before Imu, which seems to suggest that Davy Jones was in fact the one who Imu usurped. Altogether, this paints the picture of Davy Jones as the likely king of the Ancient Kingdom, and this also explains the personal animosity between Imu and Davy Jones, the king and the usurper. It is also all but guaranteed that Imu had the Eternal Youth operation performed on him. This is heavily implied by Doflamingo and practically confirmed by the Revolutionary Army, as the surgery would be the one explanation as to how Imu has managed to live on since the time of the Second World over 800 years ago, and how he still maintains a youthful appearance today in his true form. Now with that in mind, what is strongly implied to have happened in the Void Century? Well, Vegapunk tells us that the 20 kings fought the Ancient Kingdom and that ancient weapons were used in this war to flood the seas. But Vegapunk strangely says that he cannot figure out whose side was actually in the right. Now, some readers seem to assume that this indicates that both sides in the war may have been evil, but that is rarely the case in One Piece. The themes of One Piece focus more on propaganda and narrative control, with us being shown arc after arc that the good guy's side can be incorrectly framed as evil by the scheming villainous side. Cobra was a good king, Crocodile simply framed Cobra as evil to justify the rebellion as Crocodile aimed to usurp King Cobra. Riku was a good king, Doflamingo simply framed Riku as evil to justify the rebellion as Doflamingo usurped Riku. Oden was a good daimyo and rightful shogun, Orochi simply framed Oden as evil to justify Orochi usurping Oden as the shogun of Wano, so on and so forth. Basically, in all these situations, Oda always presents a clear evil side and a clear good side. The problem is always that the evil side attempts to change the narrative to try to portray the good guys as the bad guys. So when Vegapunk says that the records he has of the Void Century War make it unclear who was actually good and who was evil, I think we can pretty safely say that, considering Joy Boy's side and his faction has consistently been portrayed as the protagonists of the story, it is very likely that the Ancient Kingdom was in fact the good guy's side. And all that happened is that Imu did something to frame the Ancient Kingdom and perhaps its king Davy Jones as evil to manipulate the other 20 kings to rally against them. I explain in far greater detail in this video, but there is significant evidence that Imu actually used Dami Reversi to puppeteer Davy Jones and make him seem like a villain, potentially even forcing Davy Jones to use the Ancient Kingdom's weapons on innocent nations, which was the trigger to rally an alliance of kings against the Ancient Kingdom. After all, this matches beat for beat Doflamingo and King Riku's storyline. And keep in mind that Dressrosa is explicitly spelled out for us to be a metaphor for the story of the larger world of One Piece in general, and Doflamingo himself is a very, very blatant parallel to Imu. Hell, Doflamingo literally wants to be Imu, and Doflamingo is even shown foreshadowing Imu's eventual defeat in the very same page that Imu is officially introduced. Now, Doflamingo's story in Dressrosa was of course puppeteering Riku to make Riku do evil things and blow stuff up, which in turn turned everyone against Riku. Everyone rallied around Doflamingo instead, and Doflamingo successfully usurped Riku and started his new regime, which was of course secretly a dystopia. So considering Oda blatantly wrote Doflamingo and Imu with having essentially exactly the same power, being able to puppeteer other people, it is extremely likely that we had the same scenario play out back in the Void Century, with Imu puppeteering Davy Jones to do evil things, potentially even using the ancient weapons to blow innocent nations up, thereby framing Davy Jones and the Ancient Kingdom as villains, and then the other kingdoms had to come together to rebel against the Ancient Kingdom. The chances that Imu did this to Davy Jones is made even more likely considering in the modern day Oda literally has Imu do the very same exact thing to Davy Jones's descendant, Rox, turning Rox into his puppet and subsequently turning Rox's crew against him. As such, it is a very, very safe bet, heavily implied by the narrative so far, that Imu used deception to turn everyone against the Ancient Kingdom and its king. Beyond that, we can also infer that in the Void Century War, despite the king Davy Jones falling, Joy Boy, who wasn't the king, still ended up becoming the champion for the Ancient Kingdom's side against Imu. It's very possible Joy Boy nearly defeated Imu, considering the trauma Imu seems to experience from feeling Joy Boy's haki again. However, for whatever reason, Joy Boy fell short, and Imu succeeded in leading the alliance in the complete takeover of the Ancient Kingdom, in the defamation of Davy Jones and the Davy clan, and most importantly, in erasing the history of what actually happened. So again, much like Doflamingo managed to erase a lot of people's memories to hide the truth as to what actually happened when he usurped Riku's position, Imu seems to have done something similar, but on a much larger scale. The entire century wherein this battle against the Ancient Kingdom and Joy Boy took place was erased from history. And to get a little speculative, it was very likely done through the use of some supernatural means, likely a devil fruit, as I explain in greater detail in this video. The fact that the only evidence of what happened during the Void Century, and really about the truth of the Second World in general, i.e. that the world used to be continents instead of islands prior to the Great Flooding, can be found on poneglyphs, suggests that there must have been something supernatural that Imu actually did to erase all traces of the past, as this type of mass erasure of all records is literally not possible without magic. No matter how thorough Imu and the world government may have tried to have been in erasing all records of what happened in the Void Century, it is completely impossible for them to have scrubbed the entire planet of all records, all letters, all diaries, all newspapers, all maps, etc. I mean, keep in mind, they couldn't even find one pregnant woman despite devoting all their resources to doing so. It is logistically not possible for them to have found and shredded every single scrap of paper from an entire century. This is practically confirmed by the fact that we literally saw that they were unable to even destroy a single library properly without most of the books being recovered and safely hidden. So successfully eliminating all books and all records across the entire planet would obviously not have been possible for them without magic. And even beyond physical records, how would they have forced everyone on the planet to just shut up and never verbally tell a single one of their descendants what happened? Especially considering that the giants all lived for centuries, so really it's only a few generations back that the Void Century War happened for them, meaning it makes no sense that they all don't seem to remember those events. So yes, while it is speculative, at this point the Void Century simply has to have involved Imu using some sort of fruit ability that erased all memories and somehow wiped clean all records of the past. And the further proof is in the fact that the poneglyphs are the only place that Void Century information still remains, because the poneglyphs are obviously products of haki. Remember, poneglyphs have been established to be indestructible, but they can't have originally been indestructible, because otherwise the Kazuki could never have chiseled text into the rocks in the first place, meaning haki must have been imbued into the poneglyphs afterwards to make them indestructible. After all, we know that Joy Boy can store haki in objects for centuries, and the poneglyphs are messages from Joy Boy. This explains why the poneglyphs are the only records of the Void Century in existence, because whatever mass memory and record wipe was done at the end of the Void Century via Devil Fruit power would not have been able to affect poneglyphs, because they were the one thing that would have been made impervious to Devil Fruit magic due to being imbued with haki. Now, it's impossible to say if Imu himself performed the memory wipe, or if he somehow used the powers of a memory fruit user at the time to do it, who knows. But it is very possible that Imu had his own equivalent of sugar at the time that did the job and essentially created the Void Century. Now, what has happened in the 800 years since the Void Century? Well, after leading the Alliance to overthrowing the Ancient Kingdom and likely Davy Jones, Imu seemingly organized the creation of a new regime, composed of the 20 kings who took over with him. However, Imu did not want this to actually be an alliance of equal kings. He considered himself to be the one true king, and really the one true god of the world. So he established a hierarchy, and this is where it gets really interesting. The manner in which Imu constructed the system of the Celestial Dragons and the world government. Imu was very intelligent in this regard. He knew that if he ruled over the world as an immortal emperor for 800 years, that it would inevitably at some point start to look bad to the very citizens of the world, and this could cause rebellion. So Imu set up a system with several barriers. At the lowest level, he created the world government, which is a faux government that is meant to give the illusion of an egalitarian ruling body that unites the world. All kingdoms that were not part of the initial rebellion against the Ancient Kingdom were allowed to join this. However, above the world government were the kings who were part of the Alliance, the Celestial Dragons, and they essentially get to control the world government and tax everyone below them. Imu made sure that the members of these other royal families that fought with him in the original alliance were rewarded with overwhelming splendor and luxury, essentially completely neutering them by making them so happy that they're blind to Imu being the true dictator of the world. But Imu did actually need some functional puppets to serve him personally, and to serve as the outward governing body that would dictate the world while Imu gets to rule from the shadows. And so Imu created the Gorosei and the God's Knight system for this purpose. The God's Knights are Imu's personal militia, picked from the strongest fighters of the Celestial Dragons over the years. Imu would give them a fraction of his power to make them even stronger, but this also would give him absolute control over them, essentially being a deal with the devil. However, among the God's Knights, Imu also seems to select the absolute strongest and most capable God's Knights that pop up throughout the centuries and promote them to permanent servant status, making them one of the Gorosei. This is the elite roster of 5 servants that serve Imu over a much longer period of time, as Imu grants them some degree of agelessness as well, allowing them to live for centuries. Imu uses them as his mouthpieces to run the world government from above. However, of course the Gorosei are replaceable when Imu deems necessary, and a new God's Knight can be used to supplant one of them at any time. This is how Imu ruled for centuries. However, the biggest problem for Imu was that his rule was not absolute. In Imu's ideal world, there would actually be no need for this vast world government of various kingdoms and citizens and so on. Imu's ideal world is actually not yet complete. That brings us to the present and the key problem stopping Imu from creating his ideal world that may be about to be resolved. But first, we are doing a huge spring sale where you can buy any 2 posters and get 3 free. And I mean any posters, because this month only we are bringing back all the posters from all of our collections. That's right, you can mix and match any 5 posters from any collection, and when you add them to the cart, 3 of them will automatically be free. And this month only you can also get the God Trio of posters: Nidhogg, Nika, and Imu, each with their own hidden image inside the poster. If you've been holding off on getting your posters, this spring sale is your chance to get them at a major discount. The spring sale ends in April, and the God Trio posters are going out of production. So get your posters while this spring sale lasts by hitting the link in the description below. It's implied multiple times that the Great Flooding during the Void Century War was supposed to go further and actually eliminate all land in the world, but it seems that they likely ran out of juice for their ancient weapon before reaching the end of the job. This left Imu with this messy world where a large portion of humanity still exists, but Imu has no neat way to eliminate them all. While Imu himself is unimaginably powerful, there are some strange limits to using his abilities. If Imu uses his full Zoan transformation to fight, there appear to be painful consequences, meaning that Imu can't fight often and is forced to fight using proxies instead. Imu relies on puppets like his Gorosei and the God's Knights, but 13 soldiers aren't enough to kill everyone. Imu technically also has the vast marine forces under his control, but unlike the Gorosei and the God's Knights, whose servitude is absolute and enforced by Imu's black magic, the marine forces are independent humans who can only be controlled and directed thanks to propaganda. The Marines only serve the world government because they have been led to believe that it is a just and egalitarian regime that protects the innocent people of the world. Even the highest ranking Marines don't actually know about Imu's existence, and they certainly don't know that Imu's true goal is to end all of humanity. As such, while the Marines are technically under the Celestial Dragon's control, there are limits to what Imu can do with them. Imu can never leverage them to accomplish his endgame goals of enacting genocide on the planet, as most of the Marines are ultimately just normal humans with families and loved ones who think that they are helping the world. As such, with with Imu himself only being able to fight sparingly, and the Gorosei and the Gods Knights as his handful of only true soldiers who would be willing to enact global genocide, Imu's position of power is actually conflicting. Yes, he has all the military power he needs to rule the world, however his true goal is to completely cleanse the world, much like Enel did, with ideally only Imu and a small set of loyal supporters remaining. But Imu doesn't actually have the military power to do that. If Imu attempted to do that, then he would lose most of his military. That is why Imu has been so desperate for a long time now to get his hands either on the ancient weapons and the Mother Flame again, or to try and manipulate other powerful beings from the Blue Seas to serve under him with the Holy Knight Pact, as this would increase the personal military power that is completely in Imu's own hands. That is why Imu was salivating at the prospect of controlling Harald and Elbaf, as Imu believed that this could be the missing piece. This could be the ultimate military authority that would enact his will to wipe out all mankind. And this is why he valued Harald so highly, as Harald supposedly had the potential to destroy the world by himself if Loki hadn't stopped him. Of course, that didn't work out, leaving Imu in this uncomfortable position of having all this power to rule, but not enough to perform his final act of cleansing. And the longer that Imu rules, while free beings and races still exist, there is always the possibility of rebellion. That's also why Imu lives with such fear. He knows that despite his elaborate regime having lasted 800 years, it is in fact a very fragile house of cards. It is entirely dependent on Imu tricking humanity to police itself on his behalf to maintain control. But if Imu is exposed and the Marines abandon him, or the Marines themselves are defeated by pirates and revolutionaries, then Imu and his 13 soldiers would not fare well in war against the entire revolting world. This is why Imu fears the forces of the past, the D, rising up again to spark this rebellion. This is why Imu's biggest need in recent times has been creating a personal military power that is his and his alone, that can be used to wipe out all that is left. And that's also why we've now in the present reached a very interesting junction in history, because Imu is on the verge of finally getting what he's needed for the last 800 years, that long coveted personal military power. Now, it's not just Imu and his 13 enslaved soldiers. Now, thanks to the pacifistas, Imu finally also has a sea of absurdly powerful, completely obedient foot soldiers, likely the strongest army in the world, and on top of that, Imu is now almost able to use the ancient weapon freely again thanks to York's Mother Flames. These were the two missing pieces that Imu has been waiting for. Finally, his own military force that has no will of its own, and a weapon of mass destruction to finish flooding the world with. With these pieces, Imu theoretically can destroy the rest of the planet and finish the job. However, just as Imu has finally gained the means to eradicate the rest of the world once and for all, so too has the potential for rebellion reached an all-time high, as the strongest era of freedom fighters the world has seen since the Void Century has finally emerged. That is the beautiful crossroads of destiny that we have reached in One Piece today, setting the stage for the war to end all wars. It's a race to see if Imu can capitalize on the newfound military might that he has accrued to wipe out the world forever, or if the new generation can form an alliance powerful enough to overthrow Imu's regime, just as Imu's alliance once brought down the ancient kingdom's regime 800 years ago. So let me know what you believe the missing gaps of history are in Imu's past in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video then definitely like and subscribe. And you can get my extended thoughts on how Doflamingo's story further foreshadows the truth about Imu by listening to my weekly podcast that just dropped, by becoming a member, or by supporting me on Patreon. Link in the description below.